If you'd asked me a week before Christmas how I thought the holiday would go, I might have said the usual. Awkward conversations, dry turkey, my brother showing up an hour late and somehow still managing to leave with leftovers before dessert. I expected passive-aggressive comments from my mother, a long sigh from my dad about how expensive everything is these days, and the same damn Nat King Cole record skipping during the Christmas song. But I didn't expect to be gutted like a deer at the dinner table while my family watched with their mouths full of the roast I bought, cooked, and paid for. I arrived early that morning, like I had every Christmas for the last 15 years. Well, 12 years actually, but who's counting? I came with bags of food, a gift for everyone, and a full tank of tolerance. The driveway was still cracked from the last freeze, something my dad always said he'd fix once he had the time. I used to offer to pay for it, but after the fourth refusal, I stopped asking. Sometimes people would rather live in broken things than admit someone else had to fix it. Inside, everything looked the same. The dusty ceramic village still sat on the fireplace mantel, each tiny house lit from inside, like little lies we kept telling each other. My mom was stirring gravy in a pot she got as a wedding gift in the 70s, the one with the melted handle. She smiled when I walked in, kissed my cheek, and said I looked tired. I smiled back, said, "So do you," and we pretended that was affection. The rest of the day crawled by in slow motion. Zach, my younger brother by 5 years, arrived just before dinner. He brought his new girlfriend, some 20-something yoga teacher with a name like Harmony or Serenity. I genuinely forgot 5 minutes after she said it. He didn't bring a dish, didn't bring a gift, didn't even take his boots off before stepping onto the carpet my mother still vacuumed in perfect lines. By the time dinner started, I was on my third glass of wine and clenching my jaw so tight I could have cracked walnuts. The table was set, the roast beef sliced, the mashed potatoes sculpted into a mountain with a butter crater in the middle. Everyone sat down. My father, Frank, cleared his throat and raised his glass. "To family," he said, not looking at me. We all repeated it, somewhat, and started eating. It wasn't until about 10 minutes in, when Zach was telling some story about the time his crypto crashed, and his girlfriend giggled like that was adorable, that it happened. My mother mentioned something about the heating bill being high this month, and I, like an idiot, said I'd already paid it. That's when Dad put his fork down. "You know," he said, not looking up from his plate, "you're always doing these things paying for this, covering that, but it's not really helping, Emily." The table got quiet. Harmony or Serenity blinked. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He finally looked at me. "I mean, you act like you're the savior of this family, but really, you're just here. You're just a burden. You've been living like you're still part of this house, but you're almost 40 and still don't have a real family. Maybe it's time you moved on." I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. Somewhere deep down, I think I always knew he thought this about me. Maybe I had always known they all did. The room stayed quiet, no one spoke. My mother didn't say a word. Zach kept chewing. His girlfriend looked like she wanted to disappear. I stood up without saying anything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my wine glass, although I wanted to. I just excused myself, walked up the stairs to my childhood bedroom, and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, the one with the creaky frame and the quilt my grandmother made, and I stared at the wall. My laptop was in my bag. So was the folder I'd brought just in case things went sideways. I didn't really plan to use it, but in that moment, all the dots started connecting like a constellation I'd never bothered to trace until now. They had no idea. None of them knew whose name the house was actually in. They thought I was just helping, but over the years, I'd become the financial backbone of everything they touched. I paid their mortgage when they almost lost the house in 2012. I covered their health insurance when my dad got laid off. I co-signed Zach's car loan because it'll help him build credit. I covered the damn heating bill for the last 9 winters. And in return, I got called a burden. A burden. So I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, then into the loan servicing sites, then into the insurance portals. Password after password. I changed settings, removed names, suspended payments. One by one, I erased myself from every piece of their lives that I was holding together. Downstairs, I could still hear the clinking of forks and fake laughter. But something was shifting. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was focused. I stayed up all night. When my mother knocked once to ask if I was okay, I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk. Because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. And when morning came, I wasn't the same daughter who walked in with wine and gifts. I was someone else now. Someone they were about to meet for the very first time. The morning after Christmas didn't start with cinnamon rolls or leftover pie. Not even the bitter coffee my father always made too strong and refused to dilute with milk like a real man should. No one greeted me with a good morning, or even a curious knock on the door to ask how I was feeling after walking away from the table like some ghost from the past. I woke up in silence, sunlight bleeding through the blinds onto the same faded posters I'd hung in high school, and I felt like I was staring at the aftershock of an earthquake that hadn't quite finished shaking the foundation. Only this time, I wasn't running from the damage, I was about to light the damn match. I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop balanced across my knees and my phone buzzing with silent notifications from holiday sales and group texts I didn't care about. I ignored them all. My fingers moved on autopilot, logging into portals and dashboards that I'd memorized better than most people memorize birthdays. Electric company first. Cancel autopay. Remove secondary user. Set account for final billing at end of the cycle. Done. Then the gas company, then water, then the garbage pickup, which they would never even realize until 3 bags of leftovers rotted on the curb for a week. Each click, each confirmation email that pinged my inbox, gave me a hit of something stronger than coffee. Maybe it was relief, or control, or just the deeply buried satisfaction of reclaiming something that had always been quietly stolen. I didn't slam doors or scream at anyone or throw a tantrum like I did when I was 15 and grounded for sneaking out to a concert. This was calm. This was adult. This was business. Next was the home insurance. That one felt particularly poetic because back when I refinanced the house to help them out of foreclosure, exactly 10 years ago this February, I made a quiet little adjustment in the paperwork. My father was a proud man, the type who never read the fine print and always assumed he was the captain of the ship, even when it was sinking under his command. But in that refinancing packet, buried between line items and amortization tables, sat a clause that made me the legal primary owner of the home. He co-signed as a financially interested party, but the deed? That had only one name. Mine. I didn't tell them back then because I didn't need to. They needed saving, and I had the credit score, the income, and the desperation to keep them afloat. It was a gift, I told myself. A way to protect the family. But it stopped feeling like protection the minute I was called a burden by the man whose medical bills I'd negotiated down to half their original amount while pretending I was just helping with the paperwork. I moved next to his truck loan. My father always bragged about that truck like it was some symbol of manhood, hauling lumber once every 6 months and parked crooked in the driveway like it deserved more space than the rest of us. He'd gotten it 3 years ago with a hefty down payment from a work bonus, which was really a quiet Venmo transfer from me labeled Early Christmas. The truth was, his credit wouldn't have covered a bicycle, let alone a $40,000 truck. So I co-signed. And when the dealership added me as the primary payer, I let it ride because it was easier than arguing. Until now. I logged in, switched the primary contact information, and suspended payments indefinitely. Let the lender call him. Let the truck sit in the driveway until they came to tow it away. Let him feel, just for a moment, what it's like to lose something that looked like his, but was never really his to begin with. My phone buzzed around 10 a.m. with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I finally glanced at the screen. Mortgage Servicing Department. I let it go to voicemail and turned back to my suitcase, folding my clothes with slow, methodical movements like I had all the time in the world. I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway before the kitchen door burst open like a scene out of a bad TV drama. "What the hell did you do?" Frank's voice was sharp, loud, like he'd finally noticed the ground shifting under him. He held his phone in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other, his face red enough to make the garland look faded. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into my bag and handed him a folder with a single sheet inside, printouts of all the account terminations, the mortgage clause he never read, and a short note from my lawyer confirming that all actions taken were legal and effective immediately. "I'm moving on," I said, repeating his own words back to him with the same cold detachment he'd gifted me with 24 hours earlier. He opened the folder, eyes scanning, lips moving silently, the lines in his face tightening with each second. I walked past him with my suitcase, down the same staircase I used to slide down in my socks as a kid, and out the front door without another word. Behind me, the house stood quiet. But something told me that silence wasn't going to last. Not when every pipe, every switch, every payment they'd ever relied on was now crumbling like the lies they'd built their comfort on. They wanted me gone. So I left. But I wasn't going alone. I was taking the whole damn stove with me. It didn't take long for the walls to start closing in around them, and when I say them, I mean the people who used to sit at the top of my emotional food chain, my family. The ones I had spent over a decade protecting from the real world like some unpaid security guard. Only now, with me gone, the doors they thought were solid were suddenly swinging wide open, and the locks they thought they held the keys to were jammed with rust. I didn't hear anything the first day, not a text, not a call, and for a moment, I imagined that maybe they were too proud to admit the house was bleeding from all corners. But on day 2, the messages started pouring in like cold rain you can't shut the window against. The first one was from my mother, Linda. It was carefully worded, dressed up in fake sweetness, like she was trying to play mediator between a dictator and the rebel army. She said she understood I was upset, but hoped I would reconsider some of the more drastic decisions I had made. No acknowledgement of what was said at the table. No apology for sitting there in silence while I was publicly gutted like a Thanksgiving turkey. Just her old favorite move, pretend it didn't happen and hope I'd be the one to sweep it under the rug again. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have the words, but because I finally understood that silence can scream louder than anything else. The second came from Zach, my younger brother who, until last week, had never once paid a single utility bill or handled a credit card payment without texting me for help. He'd never understood interest rates, late fees, or why his car payment was a few $100s higher than it should have been after he refinanced behind my back to buy more equipment for that photography business he never got off the ground. The voicemail he left was short and ugly. He blamed me for everything, said I was destroying the family, accused me of overreacting, and threw in something about how we all have problems but we don't sabotage each other over a little tough love. Tough love? That man had no idea what real sacrifice looked like, and the idea of him throwing that phrase at me like I hadn't spent 10 years cleaning up his financial diarrhea felt like someone punching me in the throat while asking for a glass of water. And then came the best one. Or maybe the worst, depending on how you look at it. It was a voicemail from Frank. Just 10 seconds long. No, hello, no, I'm sorry, not even a sliver of acknowledgement for what he'd done. Just one gravelly sentence that sounded more like a threat than a question. What the hell did you do to us? That's when I knew I'd hit the nerve I was aiming for. Because us wasn't a family anymore. It was a system. A machine that ran on my quiet labor, my unnoticed payments, my willingness to be the background character in their lives while they stumbled around pretending they had everything figured out. And now, without me, that machine was sputtering, groaning, threatening to collapse under the weight of its own denial. Frank, I later heard through a cousin, tried to reconnect the utilities, but was met with an avalanche of red tape. Turns out, when you're not on any of the accounts, It's a little harder than making a few phone calls and yelling at someone named Jennifer in customer service. He couldn't access the online portals, couldn't reset the passwords, couldn't even verify his identity on the phone because I'd been the one paying those bills for so long they didn't even know his name. Zach's car disappeared from the driveway 3 days later, repossessed in the middle of the night by a tow truck that probably had my name on a list somewhere. He sent me a photo of the empty parking spot with a middle finger emoji and the word nice. I didn't write back. What was there to say? Welcome to consequences? And me? I was already gone. By the end of the week, I was driving upstate toward a cabin I'd quietly bought last spring with my savings, a place I'd always told myself I'd visit when I had the time. Turns out time becomes very available when you finally cut loose the anchors you've been dragging for years. The drive was long, the roads empty, and the air colder than I remembered. But with every mile, I felt lighter, like something heavy had been peeled off my skin and left behind in that broken house. The cabin sat by a frozen lake, its roof blanketed in snow, chimney waiting like it knew I'd come. I unlocked the door, dropped my bags on the wooden floor, and lit the fireplace with hands that had finally stopped shaking. I sat down with a glass of wine and opened the envelope my lawyer had mailed me weeks ago, one I hadn't dared to open until now. Inside was a single document with a bold headline, Transfer of Ownership, effective immediately. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because for once, I felt exactly what I wanted to feel: control, clarity, and an absence of guilt so pure it tasted better than any Christmas dinner ever had. They thought I was the burden, but now they were carrying their own damn weight. And I was just getting started. There is something oddly satisfying about watching people scramble to keep their heads above water when they once insisted they didn't need your life raft. And no, I don't say that with cruelty in my heart. Only with the kind of clarity that comes after you've spent far too long handing out rescue ropes to people who only ever use them to tie you down. I'd been gone for barely 3 weeks when the house began falling apart, the kind of slow collapse that doesn't make the news, but makes a deep crack in the foundation of every story those people use to tell themselves about being fine without me. I didn't go digging for updates, not at first. I didn't ask anyone what was happening, didn't check the mail at the old house, didn't even so much as log in to the credit monitoring account I used to obsess over in case someone used my name for something stupid again. But it's funny how information always finds you when people are panicking, and in a small town like ours, the grapevine isn't a vine, it's a goddamn jungle. It was my cousin Teresa who told me first. She called to check in the same way someone might knock on your door at 1 a.m. claiming they were just passing by. Her voice was dripping with pretend concern, but I could hear the curiosity crawling under her words like termites in a floorboard. She let it slip halfway through the conversation, after asking how the cabin was and whether I was planning on staying up there forever like some mountain witch. She said, "Well, your folks posted something weird on Craigslist, an ad for a room rental." Said it was a large private bedroom with shared kitchen and bath access. I thought, "Isn't that your old room?" I didn't answer right away because the image punched me in the gut with equal parts rage and laughter. My old room. The one with the poster of the Cranberries still taped to the closet door. The one that smelled like childhood fears and burnt toast. The one they hadn't touched in years except to store extra wrapping paper and broken appliances they didn't want to throw away. And now they wanted to rent it out to strangers like it was just another line on a spreadsheet. I hung up politely, then laughed until my ribs hurt. Not because it was funny in the traditional sense, but because of how far they'd fallen in such a short time. That house was circling the drain, fast. The pre-foreclosure notice had likely arrived by now, and with the utilities cut off or past due, they were probably relying on battery-powered lanterns like a camping trip gone horribly wrong. Zach, according to another cousin, because apparently I was now the subject of weekly family updates, had moved in with his girlfriend somewhere across town, only to get dumped within a week after she found out about the car repossession and realized he had no backup plan, no job with real hours, and no money of his own. He went crawling back to my parents like a lost dog, and rumor had it he was now sleeping on the living room couch, hugging the Wi-Fi someone else was probably paying for. Then came the cherry on top, the moment that felt like something out of a low-budget sitcom. They held what they referred to as a family meeting to discuss how to handle the Emily situation. I wasn't invited, of course, because what would a meeting about me be if I were actually in the room? According to my cousin Michelle, who took a screenshot of the group text they created afterward and sent it to me with the subject line, "Thought you'd want to see this," they all agreed I was being irrational, overly sensitive, and possibly mentally unstable. Frank even wrote, "She's always been too emotional. This just proves it." But the best part? The punchline to the whole performance? They decided that if they extended a hand, if they were willing to forgive me and allow me back into the family, that maybe I'd come to my senses. They actually wrote that. Allow me back. Like I was a dog that ran out of the yard and needed to be coaxed home with treats and false promises. I didn't reply to the group message. I didn't even acknowledge it publicly. I just read it once, screenshot it for safekeeping, and then deleted the entire thread. I was sitting on the back porch of my cabin at the time, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall into the lake like tiny secrets being buried for good. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated or even angry. I felt distance. Beautiful, clean, freezing distance. And then, just when I thought the performance was over, the final act came thundering in like a poorly rehearsed stage crash. It was close to midnight 2 nights later when I heard the banging, loud, aggressive, the kind of knock you don't ignore unless you already know who's on the other side. I peeked through the curtain, slow and quiet, and there he was. Frank. Standing on my porch in a heavy coat, breath fogging in the cold, his fists still pounding like the door owed him something. I didn't open it. I didn't even flinch. I stood behind that curtain and watched him grow angrier by the minute, pacing, muttering, pulling out his phone like he might call someone who could make me care again. I didn't. I just waited, heart calm, eyes steady, until he gave up and disappeared into the dark. He came all that way thinking he still had some kind of power. But the truth was, that door wasn't locked. It just wasn't ever going to open for him again. By the time spring rolled around and the ice finally broke on the lake outside my cabin, the world had settled into a new shape, jagged, unfamiliar, but quieter somehow. Like the silence after a storm that leaves everything looking the same on the outside while rearranging it completely underneath. The snow was gone, the trees were starting to flirt with the idea of blooming, and I could finally open the windows again without freezing my fingers off. That's when the reality of what I'd done really began to sink in, not as a list of actions or consequences, but as a new kind of normal that didn't revolve around saving people who would never admit they needed saving in the first place. The house back in town officially hit pre-foreclosure status by the end of February, and by March, a yellow notice had been slapped on the front door like a scarlet letter for everyone to see. I didn't go to check it myself. Lord knows I wasn't about to show up and be accused of rubbing salt in wounds I never asked to make in the first place, but word travels fast, especially when people are looking for someone to blame. My cousin Jenny texted me a blurry photo of the notice, no message, just the image like a warning or a question. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Frank lost the house, plain and simple. He tried to fight it, according to what I heard, called the bank multiple times, argued, begged, cursed, threatened lawsuits that never materialized. But none of that changes paperwork, and none of it undoes a decade of pretending the ground under your feet is yours when someone else paid to keep it from caving in. In the end, he had to pack up what was left of his pride into boxes that no longer belonged to him, and the house he once ruled like a tired old king became another empty shell in a fading neighborhood. Linda didn't leave with him. She moved in with an old friend from church, someone who'd once whispered to me at a potluck that she admired how devoted I was to my family. Funny how fast admiration turns into opportunity when your world falls apart. My mother didn't reach out. Not directly anyway, but I could feel her presence in the shadows of every update I received from others. She'd always been better at martyrdom than confrontation, and I imagine in her head, she was now living out some tragic drama where I was the ungrateful daughter who walked away and never looked back. Zach picked up a night shift at a warehouse on the edge of town, the same one he used to mock for being soul-crushing, and beneath him. I heard he moved into a studio apartment with paper-thin walls and no central heat, and that he spends his weekends drinking cheap beer and scrolling through Instagram like someone looking for a version of his life that never got uploaded. He hasn't contacted me since the last voicemail, but someone told me he mentioned me at a party, called me ice cold, like that was some kind of insult instead of the first accurate thing he's said in years. Some of my cousins cut me off completely. Others reached out in secret, whispering through private messages that they wished they had the nerve to do what I did, that they were proud of me even if they couldn't say it out loud. One even wrote, "You didn't burn the bridge, you finally stopped rebuilding it every time they lit the damn thing on fire." That one made me cry a little, in that way you cry when someone finally says the exact thing you didn't know you needed to hear. But through it all, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won some great battle or emerged from the ashes like a triumphant phoenix. What I felt was something simpler, something steadier, peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgiveness or closure, because I don't believe in either of those fairy tales anymore. No, this was the kind of peace that comes when the noise stops. When the chaos no longer has your name stitched into every stitch of its unraveling. When your phone is silent, not because people don't care, but because they finally understand that you're not coming back to fix what they broke. And here's the part one never told anyone, not even the cousins who supported me behind closed doors. I never took my parents off the health insurance plan. I could have. I logged in a dozen times with my finger hovering over the terminate coverage button. But I didn't do it. Instead, I just raised their deductible by $10,000. I didn't want them dead. I just wanted them to understand what it felt like to have the floor shift under your feet, to live without a safety net they didn't know existed. I wanted them to feel the weight of absence, not the finality of loss. That was my line. My quiet little mercy. And I would have left the story there. I would have sealed it with the kind of clean ending I used to beg for in all the chaos. But life doesn't believe in clean endings. It likes to throw one last punch, just to remind you that you're still in the ring. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was making soup, standing barefoot in the cabin kitchen, stirring a pot of lentils and humming along to a song I hadn't heard in years, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick it up, maybe habit or maybe some deep down knowing I didn't want to admit. I put the phone to my ear and heard her voice. "Emily, your father had a stroke. He's asking for you." And just like that, the air in the room changed. My hand froze over the pot. The world narrowed to a single question that sat heavy on my chest and refused to be swallowed. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding the phone like it might turn into something else if I waited long enough. She said my name again. I didn't answer. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't owe anyone a single word.